Here, the Phoenician, who's always interested in the aesthetics and even the erotic side of the cult hero, he's really interested to know, because he's longing to know details that you're not going to get out of Homeric poetry. So he says, so the passionate love that he used to have in loving Laodameia, that's of course Protesilaos' bride, how's it going for him these days? And the Ampelourgos, who's of course initiated into most of the secrets of cult heroes, I love the way he says, oh, he's still very much loving her. And you're thinking to yourself, well, okay, how does this happen? He is a hero. Yes, he's immortalized, but what's the immortalization? And up to now, it's been so neat, right? You know, there's the body in the tomb, and then there's another way of imagining the physical self somewhere in another time, another place. And I jokingly refer to that as sniffing flowers in paradise. But now you start seeing this third way of resurrection or immortalization after death, which is periodic reappearances, epiphanies.
In full splendor and in full physicality.
So it's not that Laodameia, the bride, is simply going to have a tryst with a ghost. It's too simple. It's a material manifestation of the self, and it's physical. Epiphanies don't have to be misty. They can be very, very, very physical. And so it turns out that Protesilaos, one of the ways he gets resurrected is to come back to life and visit his bride and have sex with her, just like that. And that's an epiphany. And you say, well, wait a minute, the bride is also dead, isn't she? Well, how to imagine this? Shall I take the easy way out and say, well, that's part of the mysteries? But you'll see from the wording here that it's physical and not just notional. And all the wording implies that. And the Phoenician has every reason to be so curious about, well, what is it like when they make love as cult heroes?
Yes, the text does absolutely everything to make us imagine this.
Oh, absolutely. We're supposed to imagine it because, after all, an epiphany is a visualization of something. And it has to be a real-life visualization, something that is as real to our lives as it is to the otherworldly life of heroes. That's why even the way the Phoenician says, the passionate love, eros, that he used to have in loving, eran, so it's like love the love, very ostentatious. And this is the erotic word, of course. So this is erotic dimension as well as aesthetic dimension. And the Ampelourgos, takes the cue. Oh, he's still very much loving her. And he's still being loved right back by her. So it's very physical, it's very reciprocal. And then he goes on to say, and they relate to each other just like a couple that has just come out, all hot, thermoi, from a honeymoon chamber. How much more physical can you get in a description of a pair of lovers? Is, oh, well, look at the way they look when they come out of the honeymoon chamber.
And it's an amazing temporal compression also.
Yes. Oh.
That these heroes, which I imagine to be, well, at least 1,000 or, well, more, something like this, 1,500 years old, are suddenly compressed into a pair of lovers just emerging from the chamber.
So it just brings it to our own experiential world in a very physical way. And then we're not through yet. Then the Phoenician asks, and do you embrace him when he comes to you in the garden? Or does he elude you by going up in a puff of smoke, the same way he eludes the poets?
Well, the poets,
the poets, you see, that's the difference between just listening to the story from poets, who can try to make you feel as if you're there, but it's still imagination, so it's a puff, right? Puff of smoke, but oh no, if you're in communion with, a mental communion with the cult hero, somehow it all feels physical.
And it's amazing how, the going up in a puff of smoke, of course, makes me think of Achilles and Patroclus.
Yes.
And it's interesting how this scene actually is translated. He doesn't say Achilles, he says poets. So it's a jab at Homer, right?
Oh, absolutely. It's a jab at Homer, Homeric poetry that Homer represents, at a poetic way of looking at heroes versus a religious way of looking at heroes. And what all of this is saying is, if you only could worship this hero, well then you would feel everything even more than if you just read Homeric poetry, which is what the poor Phoenician has done all his life, the way you and I just read Homeric poetry. So this is really getting connected, it's getting plugged in.
I love how the metonymy works here, just as the connection of the thought, how Ampelourgos goes straight away from the love between Protesilaos and Laodameia straight to his own embraces.
Oh, yes, no problem, exactly. So it's almost like once you connect with the sexual life of heroes in the heroic age, suddenly you feel not just aesthetic but erotic about the representative of this amazing experience. And there is a transfer. And I think this helps us understand Sappho's Song 31 better, where the speaker, the I, is looking at the interaction of the bridegroom and the bride, and then gets all hot and bothered, and she experiences an erotic meltdown. But again, the point is that once you connect with this chemistry that happens in ritual but evokes the heroic world, then you get drawn into it as well, and then you get just as emotional, and you get unguarded about your own feelings. And look what happens, then it goes on. The Ampelourgos says, in answer to the question, is this just a misty figment of your imagination or what? And he says, actually, he, that is to say, the cult hero Protesilaos, takes pleasure when I embrace him, lets me kiss him, and put my arm around his neck. So talk about a physical transfer. It's the worshiper just losing all self-control and just, shall we say, having a meltdown at the idea of being so connected to the world of heroes. And then the Phoenician says, let's think of him as still sort of semi-hemi-demi uninitiated. Poor fellow, he says, does he come to you often or just once a while? And so the Ampelourgos says, oh, I guess it's about 4 or 5 times a month that I get to have my share of him, whenever he feels like planting one of the plants you see here, or when he harvests one of them, or when he does some cuttings of blossoms. Well, I just remember that at one point I was trying to relate to somebody who didn't know English, and he was introducing his bride, and I was trying to be engaged, and so I said, well, how did you and your wife meet? And he said, oh, about 2 or 3 times a week. But it reminds me about this, how often, and how often do you have this sense of connectedness?
And it's amazing how the thought connection goes away now straight first from Laodameia to the embraces between the Ampelourgos and Protesilaos to planting and blossoming. So it's all just one unbroken trajectory.
It's exactly right. And so now it all comes together. And here I'd love to be able to use some of the pictures from I think the island of Kythera, showing garlands that are collected and strung together by the natives of this particular Greek island. But look how the Ampelourgos goes on to say, when somebody is a lover of garlands, Philostephanos, he will have sweeter smelling blossoms to show for it. Whenever Protesilaos is all over those blossoms. And I was trying to capture how in the Greek, The idea is that the presence of the hero is just almost poured over everything that happens in the garden. It's an all-pervasive presence. And then the Phoenician says, and I'm not happy about my translation, I keep wanting to change it. He says, the Phoenician does, you're talking about a very convivial hero. He must be quite the bridegroom. Actually, I like it.
I like it too.